Okay, so what the hell is a Jay's wing? Well, I don't know, you don't know, and the writers probably don't even know. So, in this video, I'm gonna try my best to establish what a Jay's wing could possibly be. The Jay's wing that is completely separated from Jay Feather. There is a minimal amount of information about Jay's wing as an actual character, so this is gonna be incredibly tricky. Before I try to get into things, I want to thank everyone who gave me their own thoughts on this topic because it's so tricky to research and explain. Everyone is linked below in the description, thank you again. With that out of the way, let's try to get into things. Jay's wing first appears in the 5th book of Power 3, Long Shadows. In Long Shadows, his earliest appearance in the book's Allegiances, he is described as a grey tabby tom with blue eyes. Does that sound familiar? The Allegiances likely take place before the events of Long Shadows, more specifically before or during Jay's wing's Sharpclaw trial, but we don't know for sure. Jay's wing is listed as one of the cats in training to be a Sharpclaw. During the Jay's wings chapters, we also find out more information regarding who he is related to. His mother was Falcon Swoop, his father was Falling Rain, and his sister was Dove's Wing. Falcon Swoop was hit by a monster before the Jay's Wings chapters, and Falling Rain just disappeared. We have no idea what happened to him. Dove's Wing is alive and well though. Now, let's take a deeper dive into the Jay's Wings chapters, starting with chapter 14. This chapter has essentially nothing that hints towards who Jay's Wing is, it's just Jaypaw finding his way out of the tunnels as Jay's Wing. Nothing is explicitly given about Jay's Wing's personality. In chapter 15, Jaypaw emerges from the tunnels and finds the other agents. This is when Jaypaw finds out he's been sent into the past by Rock. Probably Rock. We also find out Jay's wing was in the tunnels for 2 days. This is also the first instance where the agents are confused about Jaypaw's behavior as Jay's wing. The agent cats don't recognize any of the terms he uses from the present. Whispering Breeze says to Jaypaw, "Are you okay?" she queried. "I think your brain got scrambled down in the tunnels." Now, this doesn't immediately imply that Jay's wing has a different personality from Jaypaw, but Jaypaw is definitely not the same cat as Jay's wing. Luckily for Jaypaw, some of the agents just assume that the strange things he says comes from him meeting with Rock before his Sharpclaw trial, with Froldbracken saying, "Just so as long as he remembers what he was told when he went into the tunnels 2 nights ago." Of course, we never find out what Rock could have possibly said to Jay's wing those 2 nights ago before his trial. And also, Rock. Why is Rock here, and why do the agents end up leaving without Rock? What even is a Rock? Is Rock an actual cat here? Is Rock just a spirit here? Sorry, I'm getting off track. Anyway, I would also like to mention that Jaypaw sucks at hunting. As a Sharpclaw, Jaypaw is expected to hunt for himself. Spoiler alert, Jaypaw has next to no experience hunting, and he sucks at it. So, it's great that Jaypaw kinda sucks at being Jay's wing and all, but what does that say about Jay's wing as a character? Pretty much nothing. We know nothing. Okay, well, not nothing, but basically nothing. We know what he looks like, we know that he has a family, we know he existed before Jaypaw took over as him, and we know he isn't supposed to know what a ThunderClan is. But that could be said about any of these cats. Now, back to chapter 15. Later in that chapter, Jaypaw is led back to the nest of Jay's wing. Dove's wing knows the sides some tendrils of ivy hanging from an oak tree to reveal a cozy scoop among the roots. The bottom was lined with moss and feathers. Warm scent clung about them. This must be a den. Jaypaw bent his head to sniff and felt every muscle in his body tense. That's my own scent. Now, this might not seem like much at a first glance, but we learn 2 things from this. Firstly, Jay's wing doesn't just appear out of thin air. And secondly, most importantly, Jay's wing might like to sleep on moss and feathers. This is huge. This gives the reader incredible insight on what Jay's wing might like. He might consider moss and feathers comfortable. We finally get a glimpse into the life of Jay's wing. Okay, on to the next chapter. In chapter 16, Jaypaw continues to suck at hunting, keeps bringing up terms from the present that nobody understands, and explores where ThunderClan territory should be. None of this is important. Probably. What is important though is that a certain cat shows up. Half Moon. She is the biggest help that we get to solving the mystery of Jay's wing. At the end of the chapter, she says to Jaypaw, "Don't you remember how hard it rained last moon? How Whispering Breeze had to catch prey for all of us because she's the only cat who doesn't mind getting her fur wet?" "Oh sure," says Jaypaw, clearly not remembering. This doesn't really say anything about Jay's wing's character, just more information that the real Jay's wing should know. However, what she says next is probably the biggest thing we find out about Jay's wing. Half Moon shook her head. Maybe Stonesong isn't wrong when he says we should think about leaving. Sadness clouded her eyes. "I remember you said the same." "Right," Jaypaw meowed, relieved to know which side of the argument Jay's wing had taken. "There must be somewhere with more prey, and no 2-legs and badgers to bother us." I cannot stress how huge this is. From this, we find out he was in favor of leaving the lake. This is a big deal because the cats currently around the lake are debating whether or not to leave the lake entirely. This is also very useful information for Jaypaw to use because he's trying his hardest to be a character that doesn't exist. Chapter 17 happens. In this chapter, the agent cats discuss and vote on leaving the lake. Jaypaw says that living in the mountains would be difficult. The agent cats are wondering why Jaypaw knows so much about the mountains. The solution? He dreamed it. And somehow, this works. Okay, but seriously, this does imply that Jayswing probably didn't have any special dreams or received any prophecies. Anyway, yet again, Half Moon comes to the rescue to give us some more information regarding Jayswing. As the cats discuss leaving the lake, she says to Jaypaw, "If you went, I'd come with you. You know that." Jaypaw felt overwhelmed by the strength of her gaze. He wasn't used to looking another cat right in the eyes. The emotion flowing from her pelt threatened to sweep him away. He had never felt it before, not like this, but he knew exactly what it was. She loves me. At least, she loves the cat she thinks I am. So, this likely means that the real Jayswing and Half Moon had a close relationship with each other. Because, otherwise, I don't think that Half Moon would say, "You know that." Of course, this is just going off of heavy implications, because essentially everything with Jayswing is just implied. Anyway, at the end of this chapter, the cats finally vote on leaving the lake using stones. All of the other agent cats cast their stones, leaving Jaypaw to be the tiebreaker. He votes on leaving, which shortly leads to the departure of the agent cats and eventually the creation of the tribe of Rushing Water. A fun thing to consider is what would have happened if Jaypaw did not vote for leaving the lake. He obviously does, likely to fit in because the real Jayswing expressed views to leave the lake, but what if Jaypaw voted to stay at the lake? Who knows how much that would mess things up? Would the agent cats end up staying at the lake? Would the tribe never be created? Would Rock appear out of nowhere and fix Jaypaw's mistake? Who knows? Anyway. Chapter 18. The cats are preparing to leave the lake. Jaypaw might have accidentally made himself the first medicine cat ever and has introduced religion to the agent cats. As the cats leave for the mountains, Rock appears and calls Jaypaw aside. In this very moment, Rock makes the Jayswing plotline 1,000 times more complicated. Jaypaw asks Rock, "Will the real Jayswing come back now?" Rock shook his head. No, he disappeared at the start of their journey to the mountains. With a single sentence, he creates a scenario that makes this entire plotline impossible to make sense of. Now, I won't elaborate on this right now, but keep in mind, this single sentence ruins everything. I mean everything. So, pushing that aside, I'm going to briefly cover Jayswing's appearance in Omen of the Stars. We don't really learn anything about Jayswing himself in Omen of the Stars. This is because he is not supposed to exist here. Again, I'm going to ignore that entirely for now. Jayfeather appears out of nowhere as Jayswing. The agent cats are obviously confused. They ask, "Why didn't you come with us? Why didn't we notice you enter?" Jayfeather says, "I got scared and you were tired." The agent cats say, "Oh, okay." While in the mountains, Jayfeather finds out that these cats here are miserable. It's cold, the weather always sucks, and the prey hunts the cats. Regardless, he tries his best to teach them how to hunt like the present-day tribe cats. He also gets closer to Half Moon. Rock doesn't like that. Not a single bit. He tells Jayfeather that he doesn't belong in the past, that he sucks at hunting, and that he has to make Half Moon the first stone teller. Jayfeather very reluctantly obliges, because you do not go against Rock, which alters Half Moon's life forever. We don't know what exactly happens to Jayfeather afterwards, he's just sent back to the present. Okay, so this is great and all, but what does this say about Jayswing as a character? Nothing. I might be wrong, but we learn nothing about Jayswing in Omen of the Stars. Jayfeather shows up as Jayswing, does a lot of important stuff, and leaves. So, all in all, what have we learned about Jayswing? 1. He is a gray tabby tom with blue eyes. 2. He has a family. 3. He isn't supposed to know what a ThunderClan is. 4. He was likely very close with Half Moon. 5. He was in the middle of attempting his Sharpclaw trial before Jaypaw took over as Jayswing. 6. He wanted to leave the lake. And 7. Most importantly, he probably liked moss and feathers. So now I propose the dreaded question. What happened to Jayswing? Before I attempt to give my explanation, I want to present this. A timeline. I think. Okay, so I know this might look like a lot, so bear with me. This is my interpretation of all the Jayswing nonsense going on. It also helps if you don't think too much about the specifics, mostly because a lot of them are unexplainable. So, let's start with 1. This is extremely simple and easy to explain. Jayswing is born at the lake. He lives a normal life as one of the agent cats. There are 0 shenanigans going on at this point. This continues until we hit 2. Things start getting weird when Jayswing attempts his Sharpclaw trial. Now, let's just assume something happens. Anything really. Maybe Jayswing suddenly dies during his trial. Who knows? Regardless of what happened, Jayswing's reincarnation, Jaypaw, essentially takes over his body. This might be a similar situation to how the imposter took over Bramblestar's body in the Broken Code after Bramblestar died. Anyway, it helps if you don't think about this too hard because I don't want to get into how Jaypaw, who hasn't even been born yet, is able to take over the body of his former self in the past. At 3, Jayswing disappears. That's it. We don't know the specifics of Jayswing's disappearance. Did his body disappear? Was his body just left there without a spirit? We don't know. We only have Rock's word to go off of. Now, I'm going to skip 4 and 5 for now. Jayswing's appearance in Omen of the Stars sucks and messes everything up. At 6, J-Kit is born as the reincarnation of Jayswing. This is different from the reincarnation of Cinderpelt as Cinderheart, as the Jayswing part of Jayfeather seems to disappear entirely. When Jayfeather is an apprentice, he is sent back to the past to do some important stuff as Jayswing and guides the agents to the mountains. As a full medicine cat in Omen of the Stars, he heads to the tribe, gets sent back in time as Jayswing, and appears out of nowhere. This brings me back to 4. There is not a single explainable reason why Jayswing appears in the mountains in the past. He literally appears out of thin air. None of the agent cats in the mountains saw Jayswing enter the cave. This is because he did not enter the cave, he just suddenly appeared. So, my solution for this issue, rock magic. That's it, rock magic. So, with that aside, Jayfeather teaches the cats in the mountains how to hunt like the tribe and appoints Halfmoon as the first stone teller. We never find out what happened to Jayswing after this. He just disappears again, but this time, with no context given. And that's it for the timeline. Of course, assuming Jayswing doesn't come back in a future book, I'm hoping that at least made some sense. So, there really isn't a solid explanation for what happens to Jayswing. Like, we can sorta establish the timeline, but we can barely delve into the specifics of it. He just vanishes, nothing more to it. With that said, I want to end this video on a really fun what if. Since weird timeline stuff isn't out of the question, what if, somehow, Jayswing is Rock, or Jayfeather is somehow Rock? It doesn't really matter. Now okay, you might be saying, Simmons, this Jayswing video is really taking a toll on you. And I say, look at this. Jayfeather and Rock both have gray fur. Interesting, right? Like, sure, this could just be a coincidence. Maybe they just happen to essentially have the same fur color. But, what if it isn't a coincidence? Now take a look at this. This comes from the Warriors wiki. I should probably note that this is a mistake, but whatever, that's not important. Notice how Jayswing, Jayfeather, and Rock all have blue eyes. So that basically confirms it. Jayfeather is Rock, or Jayswing is Rock, or Rock is Jayfeather, or Rock is Jayswing. Any one of those. But in all seriousness, if this silly theory was true, I wouldn't be surprised if this was explored in a Jayfeather Super Edition. Although, do we really need the timeline stuff to get even more convoluted? Absolutely not. But it would be funny. And with that, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye forever.